On this Saturday night, a public health blitz in BC. How the province is cracking down as COVID-19 cases climb and videos show large crowds in close contact. A car bomb outside a courthouse. Police in Kitchener, Ontario update their investigation into a deadly explosion. Plus, grounded for good? Navigating the future of Boeing's beleaguered 737 MAX planes. And remembering victory while honoring those lost. Canada and its wartime allies mark 75 years since the end of the Second World War.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with concerns about a resurgence of COVID-19 in this country and the efforts to stop the spread, particularly among younger Canadians. The message to avoid large gatherings doesn't seem to be getting through to everyone. In British Columbia, the COVID-19 curve is on pace to climb faster in September than it did in March. And the majority of new infections are among young adults in their 20s and 30s. So, starting this weekend, officials in BC are keeping tabs on large gatherings, conducting spot checks at banquet halls and other venues open to the public, ensuring that proper protocols and physical distancing measures are being followed. But trying to limit spontaneous gatherings in outdoor spaces is proving a tougher challenge. Global's Nadia Stewart joins us now from Vancouver, where a video of a late-night street party is raising eyebrows. Nadia.
Jeff, there is mounting frustration amongst health officials as it seems some younger British Columbians just aren't getting the message. Even as the number of cases continues to climb, new video shows some are flouting COVID-19 guidelines. This was the scene on Granville Street in downtown Vancouver in the early hours of Saturday morning. Bar and club owners say when they reach capacity, they turn people away. But it seems some late-night revelers come prepared with speakers and subwoofers, launching their own impromptu street party. Vancouver police say they quickly broke up this gathering, but sources tell Global News this scene continued until at least 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There is, of course, the risk of transmission, but bars and clubs are also worried if this continues, they could be shut down again. And they say many establishments won't survive a second round of closures.
Unbelievably frustrating and disappointing. People decided to have a street party during a global pandemic. I mean, this is serious, and that needs to be stringently enforced. You're putting even police officers who might try and enforce that at risk from it.
Between the late-night street parties and drum circles in plain sight, efforts are being made to communicate this urgent message to younger British Columbians that physical distancing must be maintained, along with socializing in much smaller groups than what's shown here. Actors Ryan Reynolds and Seth Rogen answered Premier John Horgan's call to get the message out to younger British Columbians. But some say what's needed now is more enforcement. They're calling for a crackdown on those caught ignoring the rules. Back to you, Jeff.
Nadia Stewart in Vancouver. Thanks, Nadia. And front of mind for many parents right now is the countdown to classes in September. With schools across the country set to reopen, provinces and territories are releasing their plans. In Saskatchewan, Premier Scott Moe just provided an update in a Facebook post ahead of a formal announcement that's set for Monday. The move comes after that province's current reopening plan was met with backlash. Parents, teachers, even healthcare professionals raising concerns that the Safe Schools plan is anything but. Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi has more.
Jonathan Lollard's daughters are 2 and 4. His oldest will be starting school in September. The Saskatoon dad says he doesn't feel completely confident in the province's Safe Schools plan right now.
What's implemented at the moment I don't think is enough. So if another round of ideas and more precautions is probably going to make me a little bit more at ease.
The current strategy leaves a lot of details up to the province's 27 school divisions to decide on their own. Things like class sizes, how to separate students, and one big issue, masks. Many divisions have taken it upon themselves to mandate masks for students and teachers. Protests were held across the province last week, calling for the Ministry of Education to do more to protect students.
I want to see change. I want to see thresholds for when we move to each level. There has to be financial resources put into cleaning, plexiglass, smaller classrooms.
The Saskatchewan Teachers Federation says some staff have asked if they can legally refuse to work.
Why is it that only 6 people can sit together at a table in a restaurant, and yet we can jam 30 or 35 students together with a teacher in a poorly ventilated classroom?
Premier Scott Moe is expected to announce updates to the province's back-to-school safety measures on Monday. Today, he released a video on Facebook providing some details.
We will be providing an additional $40 million so that our classrooms, our students, and our staff are kept safe.
It's unclear where that $40 million will come from. Moe says the province is also working on plans for voluntary COVID-19 testing in schools for staff and students. Classes will start a week later than usual on September 8th. But with details still up in the air about what back to school will look like, for kids in Saskatchewan, more parents are looking into homeschooling as an alternative to classrooms this fall.
So we'll just see how the things will go and how the schools will handle all these situations.
Gabriela Panza-Beltrandi, Global News.
A new survey suggests Canadian restaurants could lose up to $20 billion in revenue over the next year because of the pandemic. Felicia Perillo takes a look at the struggles for the food and beverage industry from Montreal.
Bob Harmody has been working at Le Manoir restaurant and bar for more than 45 years. In all of his time here, he says he's never quite experienced a year like this one.
I think less and less people are coming out and having a beer in the bars with the big screens and the big TVs. People at home have their own 50-inch TV now and their own $2 beers at home.
The Resto Bar is open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's used to big lineups, a diverse clientele, and a staff of about 100. But owner Peter Sergakis says since reopening, staff has been reduced by 75% because clients are simply not coming.
I mean, listen, the place looks like, inside looks like a cemetery.
According to Quebec Statistic Institute, from March to June of this year, the province lost about 450,000 jobs. 365,000 of them were in the service industry, and more specifically, 100,000 jobs were lost in the restaurant and accommodation sector. Those statistics are all too familiar for Station des Sports, located downtown Montreal. Manager Kim Shore says they have about 10% of their staff back on the job. She says there are multiple reasons for the shortage, but the main one is lack of clients. In terms of revenue, the bar is bringing in about 15 to 20% of what they did last year.
Right now we have hockey, basketball is starting the playoffs. We have the Championship League soccer. And normally all these games are places packed, lineups to get in, reservations.
The most recent data from July 20th shows that 65 Montrealers have been confirmed to have been infected with COVID-19 in a bar. Sergakis says people are simply hesitant to visit restaurants and bars, and it shows.
The habits change. People are getting more, they start enjoying themselves staying home. And if there is a small risk, if they go out, they don't want to take it.
Sergakis and his employees say at this point they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They believe things will only get worse before it gets any better. Felicia Perillo, Global News, Montreal.
To the United States now, where many businesses and schools across the country are reopening, even as case numbers climb. More than 5.3 million people in the U.S. have now tested positive since the start of the pandemic, and there are now more than 600,000 cases in California alone, making it the first state to hit that milestone. But as COVID-19 cases rise, the number of daily tests are dropping. Jennifer Johnson explains.
Health officials in the U.S. are reporting a troubling trend, a 2-week drop in COVID-19 testing. Experts say delays at testing stations in at least 34 states are keeping Americans away, risking people unknowingly spreading the virus.
6-7 months into a pandemic, the fact that we can't test people reliably is shameful.
Medical experts are pushing for more widespread testing after reports up to 40% of people with the virus do not show symptoms. Patients say while testing wait times are long, waiting for results is even longer.
I got my test on July 1st, and I didn't get the results until July 21st.
The American Medical Association is pushing for new fast-track testing to quickly pinpoint potential hotspots. Meanwhile, as schools reopen, cases are spiking. At the University of North Carolina, which opened last week, clusters of outbreaks have already shown up in at least 2 dorms.
I think the university needs to have more clear communication with us about where in our building it is so that we do feel safer.
In Florida, a judge Friday refused to dismiss a teachers' union lawsuit against the state over reopening, as Governor Ron DeSantis threatens to cut off funding for schools that don't.
We're going to rip open the doors and put masks on kids and hope for the best.
Children, we are in charge of their safety.
Teachers being forced to go back are still protesting across the country.
We feel that there are some pretty irresponsible practices going on that threaten the safety and health of primarily, again, the students.
Fear and anxiety gripping the nation as the COVID-19 death toll is on the verge of surpassing 170,000 people. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
New quarantine rules for travelers entering the UK kicked in today, prompting a rush of British tourists scrambling home to beat the deadline, some with just minutes to spare. In France, thousands of Britons jammed tunnel crossings, train stations and airports after the UK announced Thursday that anyone traveling from France needs to quarantine for 14 days. That rule came into effect at 4 o'clock local time this morning. Those who fail to quarantine face fines of up to £1,000. Well, an update now on the investigation into that deadly blast in Beirut. The FBI has now sent a team to Lebanon to join the probe into the massive explosion that devastated the capital. The move follows an invitation by Lebanese authorities seeking answers into the blast at the port of Beirut earlier this month that killed more than 170 people and wounded thousands more. The FBI team joins investigators from France trying to determine what sparked a fire that caused more than 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate to explode. And in a statement released Friday, Justin Trudeau confirmed 2 Canadians were among those victims killed by that explosion. The Prime Minister offered his deepest condolences to family and friends of the 2 Canadians, adding his thoughts are also with other Canadians who were injured or are still missing. Still ahead, police provide an update into the improvised explosive device that erupted outside an Ontario courthouse. Welcome back. An investigation is underway tonight into a deadly blast outside an Ontario courthouse. A vehicle exploded yesterday in downtown Kitchener, just west of Toronto, killing the man inside. Police are still trying to figure out exactly what happened, but as Morgan Campbell explains, they believe that blast may have been caused by an improvised explosive device.
Anytime you have an event like that happen in any community, it's always a period of concern.
People across Kitchener, Ontario are still comprehending the scene outside their city's courthouse Friday after an explosive device went off inside a parked car.
It's pretty wild that it would happen like so close to home.
The blast transforming this normally peaceful area into a massive security effort. One man's body was discovered inside the car. Waterloo Regional Police say he brought the bomb to the courthouse, but the reason for the detonation is unclear. Officers can't say if there was an intended target.
We do understand, public concern over this, and our investigators are working very diligently and around the clock to try and determine the motive.
Following the explosion, police spent hours searching 2 homes, both in Kitchener. They say the residences are connected to the man in the car, and they are not looking for any other suspects. Neighbors tell Global News the man had recently moved to a home on Hearthwood Drive to live with his parents following a separation. Those details have not been independently confirmed by Global News.
Obviously a tragedy for the individual involved and for their family, but it's also a reminder for all of us that the last 4 or 5 months have been difficult for many people in different ways, and the importance for us to reflect on our own well-being, but also to check in on others.
Police say the investigation is moving quickly as they work to determine a motive. However, they say there is no concern for public safety. Morgan Campbell, Global News.
The longtime leader of the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake has died. Grand Chief Joseph Norton passed away yesterday after falling in his home. He served as Kahnawake's Grand Chief for nearly 3 decades. Norton was known across North America as a fierce defender of Mohawk rights. He played a prominent role in the 1990 Oka crisis and the rail blockades earlier this year. Norton was 70. Thousands of accounts with the Canada Revenue Agency have been breached by cyber attacks. Hackers were able to access about 5,500 accounts using a technique called credential stuffing. It relies on databases of previously stolen login information. The agency has now disabled access to all of those accounts. More than 9,000 others linked to the GC Key service, which provides access to government services online, have also been affected. Anyone who was hacked should update their passwords immediately and avoid reusing any old passwords. The CRA is investigating and has also asked the RCMP for help. Still ahead, a major setback in the efforts to contain this environmental disaster in Mauritius.
You're watching Global National.
Well, an update now on that major environmental disaster off Mauritius. The Japanese carrier that ran aground and spilled around 1,000 tons of oil has now split in two. The larger part of that vessel is being towed away, and a spokesperson for the island's shipping ministry says the other section, which contains the engine and the fuel tanks, is, quote, safe and stable. And measures have now been taken to stop any further oil from leaking and polluting the area's pristine coral reefs. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused an unprecedented pause in air travel. The number of worldwide passengers is expected to be cut in half compared to last year. And the crisis has added to the woes of Boeing. The airline manufacturer is still hoping to get its 737 MAX aircraft recertified to fly again, following 2 deadly crashes that grounded the entire fleet. As Redmond Channon explains, the perfect storm of events is expected to make for a turbulent return.
The Boeing 737 is the workhorse of the skies, the best-selling passenger jet ever. When the more efficient 737 MAX was launched, it was an instant hit. Airlines placed 5,000 orders. Hundreds were delivered. That was until 2 crashes 5 months apart. They were caused by a software flaw and grounded the entire fleet. In the second Ethiopian Airlines crash, 18 Canadians died among the 346 victims of the 2 tragedies.
And the imagination of what your loved ones suffered during those final moments, they just never go. And I have to live with that.
All MAX planes remain on the ground as Boeing works to recertify the modified aircraft and retrain pilots. But now there is a global pandemic. The UN's civil aviation body, ICAO, estimates air travel in 2020 has fallen off a cliff, with passenger numbers set to drop by at least 50% compared with last year.
I think it's going to cope with dramatically reduced deliveries in the near term, and obviously we've had some massive layoffs at Boeing and Airbus, and those may continue.
So far, Boeing has seen more than 400 cancelled MAX orders this year. When you include orders at risk, a major issue because of COVID-19, that number more than doubles, and it could get worse.
The problem that Boeing has is their contract indicated that if they couldn't deliver airplanes within a year of the scheduled timing, the customer could walk away from any or all of that order. It's critical that by the first quarter next year, the 737 MAX get back into the air.
Otherwise, many airlines might swap to competing Airbus aircraft, fearing that passengers will be hesitant to fly in a MAX.
What no one knows yet is what the consumer's reaction is going to be to the MAX.
Regaining trust will be one thing, but the great unknown is COVID-19 and how long the pandemic could eat into the demand for the 737 MAX. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
For the first time in nearly 20 years, California has ordered statewide rolling power outages. Hundreds of thousands of people were left in the dark last night for roughly an hour at a time. Those rotating blackouts were needed because of an increased energy demand. Temperatures there are hovering around 35 degrees Celsius across the state, sparking a surge in air conditioning use. That heat is expected to stick around through next week, and more outages could happen as early as today. California hasn't had rolling blackouts since 2001. And that California heat wave is also causing problems for firefighters. Crews are battling 3 major wildfires burning near Los Angeles. They're working in steep, rugged terrain in scorching temperatures. The Lake Fire is the largest blaze. It's destroyed at least 21 buildings and is now threatening more than 5,000 homes. There's concern those high temperatures and low humidity levels could spark new fires over the weekend. Up next, marking the end of the Second World War 75 years later. Wartime allies held commemorations to mark the victory over Japan, or VJ Day, the official end of the Second World War exactly 75 years ago. The British royal family led a special remembrance for the tens of thousands of soldiers, including those from across the UK, Canada, and the United States, who fought and died during the campaign.
Together they comprised a force whose courage was as remarkable as its diversity. Together they served with the greatest distinction. Without them, the war could not have been won.
And a service in Ottawa honored the 10,000 Canadians who fought in Asia and tens of thousands more who joined the Pacific Forces. They formed part of the final Allied push to victory before the armistice was declared on this day in 1945, just days after the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the village of Disley, Saskatchewan, northwest of Regina. If you'd like to share your Canada with us, please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.